1246, shots fired, officer involved. Guy started beating me, guy with my bat. Was going to hit me in the head with my own bat. Need medical too, he's going to need medical. Shot multiple times to the chest. 1246, I don't even know if I was hit. It was close combat. I need an officer to help me here too.
On April 30th, 2014, Officer Christopher Manny called for backup after shooting Dontre Hamilton in Milwaukee's Red Arrow Park.
My son was killed in this park. He was shot 14 times.
The police shooting of an unarmed young black man was part of an all-too-common national news story last year.
Dontre Hamilton!
Dontre Hamilton!
There's something that's systemically wrong here in the city of Milwaukee, and we have to correct it.
Protesters blocked the interstate during rush hour.
But this case would also mark the start of something different in Wisconsin, something that could perhaps serve as a model for the rest of the country.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Just 1 week before Dontre Hamilton was shot, Wisconsin passed a new law to mandate an outside review of all deadly incidents involving police officers. Police departments would no longer conduct the criminal investigation of their own officers. It is the first law of its kind in the country. The law is named after Michael Bell, a 21-year-old shot by police in 2004. His father spent a decade fighting for it.
I am a military officer, I am flying for my country, and I am not getting listened to. What must it be like for everybody else? Then I recognized that the system was a sham.
This police car dash cam video was recorded on November 9, 2004, as Michael Bell Jr. was stopped for a traffic violation. A few moments later, one of the officers believed that Michael had tried to grab his gun, but Michael's hands were cuffed behind his back.
Show me some fingerprints. I'm not believing this. Show me some DNA.
Following protocol at the time, the Kenosha Police Department investigated their own officers, and within 48 hours, they were cleared of any wrongdoing.
There's no crime lab report back. There's no autopsy hasn't been completed, and you're already reviewing this and clearing yourself of all wrongdoing.
This is actually the car that was here. It hasn't moved in 10 years.
By 2014, Bell had gained the support of several police unions as well as Wisconsin state representatives.
Bell joined several other families to watch Governor Scott Walker sign Assembly Bill 409 into law.
7 days later, Dontre Hamilton was shot. Protests flared in Milwaukee. Some wondered if the outside investigation mandated by the new Michael Bell law could restore the community's faith in the justice system. Several narratives emerged. Dontre had been sleeping in the park. Witnesses say they saw Officer Manny search Dontre, that the two men struggled, and that the officer struck Dontre with his baton multiple times. Then Kelly Brandmeier says she saw Dontre with the baton.
I never saw any sort of attack by Dontre toward the officer. And Dontre had the baton, was over there, and the officer did kind of lunge for the weapon once, missed, and then when that happened, Dontre swung at the officer's hand, didn't hit him, and then they split apart again, probably 10 or 15 feet apart. They kind of stared at each other for a moment, and then that's when the officer pulled out his gun and aimed it right at Dontre. And I kind of knew it was going to happen, so I turned away because I didn't want to see.
The police department had a different version of events.
Once again, a violent confrontation has occurred on the streets between a police officer and a violent, armed, combative, mentally ill individual.
The day after the shooting, Milwaukee Police Chief Edward Flynn held a news conference to announce that Dontre Hamilton had suffered from paranoid schizophrenia.
Mental health was not the reason he died. Christopher Manny was the reason Dontre died.
With his illness and without his illness, he was a loving and kind-hearted young man. We didn't think about the schizophrenia unless he had a spell or something.
We've seen his body and we've seen how the bullets ripped him apart, how his organs was ripped apart, how he was shot in the spine. This officer had no injury to his body at all. You also hear witness statements saying that, Dontre didn't hit the officer.
In accordance with the new Michael Bell law, Dontre's case was handed to an outside agency. The Wisconsin Department of Criminal Investigation, or DCI, began its report on the shooting. But immediately its independence from the police department was called into question.
What we found pretty early on in this case, and that has now been confirmed, is it really was Milwaukee Police Department detectives that really gathered the evidence, spoke to witnesses, took statements in this case, and then that information was provided to the Division of Criminal Investigation.
We did some preliminary interviews because we had to know what happened. What'd you see? What happened? Okay, here's our report. Now, anything we wrote got verified by DCI.
But 6 months after Dontre was shot, the public learned that the lead investigator working for DCI had spent 35 years as a Milwaukee detective and was currently receiving his pension from the police department.
Milwaukee is where the homicides occur. I can't get a copper from Deer Antler to come here and know what to do about a homicide investigation. DCI is the only entity, and it is made up of people, many of whom are retired from other jurisdictions, mainly urban jurisdictions, that have some experience with death investigations. It is not a common thing in Wisconsin.
As scrutiny of the investigation mounted, the police department moved forward on its own internal review of Officer Manny's actions that day.
You don't go hands-on and start frisking somebody only because they appear to be mentally ill.
The department fired Officer Manny for violating his training when he used an out-of-policy pat-down on a subject who was not suspected of a crime. But because witnesses confirmed that Dontre had grabbed Officer Manny's baton, the department maintained that his use of force and the 14 shots that killed Dontre were justified.
What the chief did was provide a little amount of justice to the situation. And we appreciated that, but we still want more.
We want justice! Arrest Christopher Manny! Arrest Christopher Manny!
Arrest Manny now! Arrest Manny now! Arrest
In December, the Hamilton family was still waiting for the outside investigation to conclude. They watched as grand juries decided not to indict the officers in Ferguson and in New York.
We gotta get justice for these families. For 8 months, waiting on a decision is just hard. It's nerve-wracking.
At the end of December, DCI and a use of force expert concluded their investigation of the shooting, which formed the basis for Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm's final charges.
There is little doubt that Officer Manny was exposed to a reasonable risk of death or great bodily harm. I have come to the conclusion that criminal charges are not appropriate in this case.
Protesters took to the streets in Milwaukee again.
So when will we stand up? Activate the power of the people. That's right. What do we want? Justice. What do we want? Now. What do we want? Justice. What do we want?
Some feel that the Michael Bell law's mandate for an outside investigation does not go far enough, and that the local district attorney should be removed from the process.
I believe is an inherent conflict of interest to have a district attorney who works with a particular police agency on an everyday basis, who is actively involved in knowing those officers, being the one to make that determination.
I think ultimately we develop processes that depend upon the integrity of the people performing their roles. All right? And we separate that from the politics of, I don't believe anybody, because everybody is 6 degrees of separation from somebody else.
Michael Bell Sr. believes that the law did make a difference in Dontre's case.
In this particular instance, it got scrutiny that our kid never had. I mean, at least an outside team came in there. I mean, our kid never had any of that. All we had was a police department that closed ranks on itself immediately and covered things up.
In the law's first year, 8 officer-related death cases were sent to outside investigators. And in all 8 cases, the officer's use of force was determined to be justified.
There is an effect there, and even though you're not seeing it on the surface, it's changing the culture below the surface.
Some days I wake up and I just hope that what happened on April 30 was a dream. But I look at my brother's picture, reality sets in. He ain't never coming back.
We want
won't stop until we get justice.
We 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 won't stop until we get justice.